The laughter was a physical thing, a wave that crashed over her in the stifling heat of the Chattanooga Community Center Hall, decorated with cheap blue and white streamers for her younger brother Kyle's high school graduation party, the balloons bobbing mockingly against the ceiling tiles as her mother's voice, sharp and clear as shattered glass, cut through the chatter of aunts and uncles and neighbors. Oh, her. Don't mind Amelia. She's just figuring out what dead-end job won't fire her this month. I swear that girl could fail at walking in a straight line. And the heat of 100 eyes locked onto her. 17 years old in a thrift store dress that suddenly felt like a costume of patheticness. Her cheeks burning with a fire that threatened to consume her whole. She'll never wear a uniform with any respect, that's for sure. Not like our Kyle here, future engineer. You can just see the success on him. And each word was a nail hammered into the coffin of her childhood. Each chuckle from a cousin, another shovelful of dirt. The room swimming through the film of her tears as she stood there, a statue of shame, her dreams of maybe joining the ROTC, of finding a path out, dissolving under the public dissection. Her own mother's performance for an audience. Amelia's just not built for things that matter. She's meant for the background. If she's meant for anything at all. And the finality of it, the branding, left a silence inside her so vast and cold it swallowed the noise of the party whole. And she didn't run, she simply turned, a ghost already, and walked out into the Tennessee evening, the humid air clinging to her skin like a funeral shroud, the sound of the party fading behind her, as she made the decision not with drama, but with the quiet certainty of a door closing forever, a decision that she would leave this town and its small-minded verdicts and never, ever look back. Because to stay was to accept the epitaph they'd already written for her. The next weeks were a blur of silent packing, of taking the $300 she'd saved from cashiering at the Piggly Wiggly, of boarding a Greyhound bus at dawn with a single duffel bag, watching the familiar streets of her failure recede into a past she vowed to outrun, the bus rolling north then west, the landscape shifting from green hills to endless flat plains, the names on the signs becoming alien, St. Louis, Kansas City, Denver, each mile a suture on the still, bleeding wound of her mother's words, until she landed, dizzy and disoriented, in the sprawling, sun-bleached indifference of Phoenix, Arizona, a city that didn't know her and didn't care to, where she found a room in a noisy, cockroach-friendly motel off the I-17 shared with 2 other transient women, and began the desperate, grinding work of survival, taking a job as an overnight cleaner in a corporate office tower, vacuuming acres of carpet under the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, emptying trash bins filled with the leftovers of other people's productive days, the smell of stale coffee and industrial cleaner becoming the perfume of her new existence, her hands growing raw, her body aching with a fatigue that sleep in her noisy, thin, walled room could never cure, living on a diet of instant noodles and discounted bread, counting every penny as the Phoenix summer beat down with a brutal, unrelenting heat that mirrored the emptiness inside her, the loneliness a tangible thing in the tiny motel room, where the only sounds were the highway's constant roar and the muffled arguments through the walls. And in those silent moments between shifts, the doubts would swarm like locusts, her mother's voice echoing in the stillness, "You're meant for the background." And she would stare at the water, stained ceiling, tears tracking silently into her hair, wondering if maybe it was true, if this was all the tapestry of her life would ever be, grime and exhaustion and anonymous toil. But somewhere in that gray landscape of survival, a tiny, stubborn ember refused to be extinguished. A quiet voice that began to whisper back to the echoes, not with rage, but with a simple, unyielding question. Or is this just the beginning? It wasn't a dramatic declaration of revenge, it was a silent pivot, a decision made on a cracked plastic chair, in a 24-hour diner, over a cup of terrible coffee. To use the very invisibility they'd assigned her as a cloak. To learn, to grow, to build herself from the ground up in the shadows where no one was watching. She enrolled. Using the last of her savings and Pell Grants, she applied for with trembling hands, at the public library computer, in community college classes, taking a single course in introductory, political science at first, sitting in the back of the classroom after her cleaning shift, her uniform smelling of lemon, scented disinfectant, struggling to keep her eyes open, her notes messy with exhaustion. But she persisted, the words on the page becoming a lifeline to a world of ideas and order far removed from the chaos of her past. And she added another class, then another, shifting her cleaning schedule, surviving on even less sleep, her body a machine fueled by determination and caffeine, her social life non-existent, her world a triangle of the motel, the office tower, and the college campus. A silent, grinding ascension of one homework assignment, one past exam, one earned credit at a time. She changed jobs, moving to a slightly better, paying daytime custodial position at the college itself, which came with a small tuition waiver, a benefit she clung to like a life raft. And now she cleaned classrooms, her ears absorbing the lectures drifting through open doors, on American government, on history, on ethics, her mind beginning to make connections, to see the architecture of systems and power, her dreams slowly morphing from a vague something better to a specific, gleaming target, a uniform that meant something. A position of authority, earned through knowledge and merit. A place in the intricate machinery of the nation. She was studying, a way to belong to something larger than the small, cruel world that had cast her out. She set her sights on the complex ecosystem of federal service, a world of acronyms and civil service exams, a ladder built on procedure and perseverance. And she began to climb it in utter silence, studying for the ASVEB and the FSOT on her breaks, flashcards in her apron pocket, vocabulary lists taped to the mirror in her now slightly better studio apartment. Her first real home, a barren but clean space that represented a monumental victory. Her meals still cheap but now occasionally including a vegetable, her life a monkish dedication to this single purpose. The rejections came, as they do, a failed exam by 2 points, an application lost in a digital void, we regret to inform you, letter that sent her spiraling for a night into a well of despair, so deep she could barely breathe. But she would get up the next morning, wash her face with cold water, and continue. The memory of that laughter in the community center, now fuel rather than poison, a dark energy she transmuted into relentless forward motion. She earned her associate's degree, then transferred to Arizona State University, majoring in justice studies, taking on student debt that terrified her, but that she viewed as a strategic investment in her own liberation. Her days a dizzying marathon of classes, work-study jobs in the campus administrative offices, and more studying, her friendships still few but now with others who also looked toward Washington, D.C., or Quantico, or the Pentagon with ambition in their eyes. And in these years, she slowly shed the skin of the ashamed girl from Tennessee, her posture straightening, her voice finding a firmer cadence, her mind becoming sharp, analytical, and disciplined, though the emotional core, the deep well of hurt, remained carefully guarded and buried under layers of focused intent. Upon graduation, a bachelor's degree in hand, she entered the real grind. The labyrinthine federal hiring process, a test of patience designed to break the faint of heart. Taking a temp job as an administrative assistant in a bland office park in Arlington, Virginia, having moved across the country again, to be closer to the heart of the machine. Her apartment a small box in a complex in Alexandria, Her life a cycle of subway commutes, computer screens, and endless applications for Pathways programs, for GS7 openings, for anything that had the words public service and advancement potential in the description, networking at sterile professional events, with a name tag on her cheap blazer, learning the language of bureaucracy, all while maintaining that outer shell of competent, unassuming diligence. Her big break came not with a fanfare, but with a quiet email offering an interview for a position as a staff assistant in a department within the Department of the Air Force. A civilian role that was the foot in the door. She had worked for 6 grinding years to find, and she aced the panel interview. Her answers crisp, her research thorough, her demeanor calm and professional. The ghost of the trembling girl in the community center, utterly banished from the room. And when the job offer came, she accepted it with a steady hand and then sat alone in her apartment, not crying tears of joy, but simply closing her eyes and feeling, for the first time, the solid ground of a foundation she had built herself beneath her feet. The work was often tedious, scheduling, memo writing, budget tracking. But she treated every task, no matter how small, as if the security of the nation depended on it. Her reliability and sharp mind quickly noticed, and she began to be given more responsibility, entrusted with projects. Her reputation growing as the woman who could get things done, who could navigate the Byzantine rules, and find a way forward, all while, in the background, she pursued more education, a master's in public administration online, and crucially, she explored pathways from civilian service into a commissioned officer role. The uniform that had lived in her mind as a symbol of everything she was told she could never have, setting her sights on the Air Force's officer training school, a grueling selection process that demanded peak physical, mental, and academic performance, and so her life became a second, even more intense boot camp of her own design up at 4:30 a.m. for running and calisthenics in the dark Virginia mornings, a full day of demanding work, then hours of studying military history, leadership principles, and current affairs. Her social life still a near zero. Her entire being focused on this single transformation. The day she received her acceptance to OTS was the day she allowed herself a single, private moment of fierce, silent triumph. A fist clenched so tight her nails left half moons in her palm, a tear not of sadness, but of pure, unadulterated validation that she quickly wiped away. Because the work was only beginning. Officer training school was a furnace, designed to break down the individual and rebuild them as a leader. And in its relentless pressure, in the sleep deprivation, the constant evaluation, the intense physical and academic drills, Amelia found not hardship, but a perverse kind of homecoming. The discipline was nothing compared to the discipline she had already lived. The resilience demanded was the very resilience she had forged in the Phoenix Motel and the Virginia studio. And she excelled, not as the loudest, but as the most determined, the most prepared, the one who could be counted on to know the answer, to help her fellow trainee, to lead by quiet example. And when she stood at attention on graduation day, at Maxwell Air Force Base, her hair trimmed regulation, short, her body strong and capable, wearing the crisp blue uniform of a second lieutenant in the United States Air Force, the silver bars on her shoulders, catching the Alabama sun. She took the oath with a voice that did not shake, and felt not the hot, shameful burn of public eyes, but the warm, solid weight of honor, earned through a million silent choices. Her career was not one of aerial combat, but of essential, unseen infrastructure, cyber operations, a field where her meticulous mind and strategic patience found a perfect home. She rose through the ranks, from lieutenant to captain. Her work protecting networks, defending data, a silent guardian in a new kind of warfare. her reputation growing within the professional circles of the military and intelligence community. Her life now one of purpose, of respect earned from peers and superiors alike, of a salary that allowed her financial security she had never dreamed of a small house near base with a tidy lawn, a life of order and contribution. And though she had long since forgiven her family, in the sense of releasing the active poison of hatred, she had never re-established contact. The cord severed that day in Chattanooga remained cut, and they knew nothing of her life, her success, her uniform, existing in her memory as a faint, faded photograph from another lifetime. The revenge, when it came, was not an act, but a consequence, not a confrontation, but an unavoidable collision of the world she had built and the world she had left behind. It happened at a national cybersecurity conference in Atlanta, a major gathering where Captain Amelia Carter was scheduled to give a keynote address on threat mitigation strategies for critical national infrastructure, a significant moment in her career. The audience filled with high-ranking military officials, corporate executives, and government leaders, and as she stood backstage, reviewing her notes in her service dress uniform, medals gleaming, her posture one of absolute authority, her aide, a young sergeant, approached and murmured that there was a small commotion at the registration desk. An older couple trying to gain entry without credentials, causing a fuss, saying their daughter was speaking, and they had a right to be there. And the name they gave was Amelia Carter. A cold, still calm settled over her. She did not panic. She did not rage. She simply nodded and said, "Please escort them to a seat in the back. Do not let them backstage." And then she walked out, under the bright lights, to the podium, to the respectful applause of 1,000 people, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found them, nestled in the back, looking shrunken and confused amidst the sea of suits and uniforms. Her mother and father, aged, dressed in clothes that suddenly looked decades out of style. Her mother's face a mask of bewildered incredulity, her hand frozen halfway to her mouth, as she saw, truly saw for the first time, not the failure she had constructed, but the woman her daughter had become, authoritative, respected, standing at the center of a sphere of importance they could not even comprehend, wearing a uniform that screamed of honor, discipline, and national service, the very antithesis of every prediction ever uttered. Amelia delivered her speech flawlessly, her voice clear and commanding, talking about defense, resilience, and the quiet, unwavering vigilance that keeps a nation safe. A metaphor that rang with a personal truth, that electrified every word, and throughout the 40-minute address, she never once looked directly at them, yet she held them in her periphery. A scientist observing the final, validating data point of a long experiment. She gave them nothing, no nod, no smile of recognition, no moment of satisfied connection. She was Captain Carter, and they were spectators. After the speech, as she was surrounded by colleagues and well-wishers, she saw her mother pushing through the crowd, her father trailing helplessly behind, and when they finally stood before her, the air between them thick with a lifetime of silence. Her mother's eyes were wide, red-rimmed, swimming in a sea of shock and dawning, horrifying realization, her mouth working but no sound coming out, just a small, choked gasp as she took in the medals, the bars, the absolute, unassailable competence and power that radiated from her daughter, a living monument to every cruel word being proven cosmically, devastatingly wrong. Amelia looked at her, her own expression one of polite, professional detachment, the kind she would offer to a civilian she had just briefed. "Ma'am," she said, her tone neutral, cool, carrying across the final, uncrossable distance. Her mother flinched as if struck. The word, "ma'am," was the final lock sliding home. It was not, "Mom," it was the title for a stranger. It was the acknowledgement of a hierarchy, where Amelia now stood irrevocably above. It was the calm, legal, dignified atom bomb of her revenge. Her mother's face crumbled then. Not in the dramatic way of the community center, but in a slow, silent collapse of every assumption her world was built upon. Tears beginning to stream down her cheeks, not of performance, but of genuine, profound shame and loss, her hand reaching out slightly before falling back to her side, utterly powerless. Amelia held her gaze for 3 more seconds, letting the woman drown in the reflection of her own past cruelty. Seeing the full weight of what she had thrown away now standing before her in blue wool and gold thread. Then, Amelia turned slightly to a general, who had approached with a question. Engaging him fully, dismissing her parents from her universe as completely, and finally as they had once dismissed her. They stood there for a moment longer. Two ghosts in a room full of substance, before turning and shuffling away. Lost and small, locked out of the shining life their daughter had built from the ashes of their rejection. There was no yelling, no scene, no listing of wrongs. The uniform had spoken for her. Her presence had been the verdict. The silent, dignified totality of her success was the sentence. And as she continued her conversation, a profound peace settled within Amelia, a closure not of raging fire, but of a deep, still ocean. She had not just gotten revenge. She had rendered it obsolete. She was no longer the girl defined by their laughter. She was an officer of the United States Air Force. She was her own proof. And in that quiet victory, forged in loneliness and polished by relentless perseverance, she found the ultimate reward, a self worth so ironclad and complete that no one, not even the echoes of the past, would ever be able to lock her out again. The story of Amelia Carter is not a story of violence, but of vindication through valor, not of screaming retribution, but of silent, steadfast building. It is the story that proves the most powerful revenge is not a blow struck in anger, but a life lived so well, so honorably, and so undeniably that the architects of your pain are forced to stand as mere witnesses to your monument. Their own smallness, the only punishment they will ever need. A testament to the unbreakable American spirit that thrives not in the noise of the crowd, but in the quiet, relentless heart of the individual who chooses, against all odds, to rise.